Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really provocative theory that zeroes in on one often overlooked reason why relationships might fail: the destruction of what the source calls male peace. The argument here is that this isn't just a preference, it's a fundamental need. So let's break down how this whole idea works. Right out of the gate, the source behind this theory makes a pretty bold claim. It says that this peace we're talking about, well, it isn't just a nice to have, it's like oxygen. And if you take it away, the argument is the relationship literally starts to suffocate. Okay, so what is male peace according to this theory? It's not just about not arguing, not at all. It's defined as this state of quiet, stillness. It's about having an environment that lets a man kind of regulate his own nervous system and process everything that happens during the day. You can almost think of it like a mental and emotional reset button. All right, this is where we get to the core argument. The entire theory really hangs on this one big idea, that men and women supposedly experience the exact same thing, total silence, in completely different ways. So the source asks us to imagine this scenario, an hour of silence. For a man, the theory goes this is a good thing. It's comfortable, it's a chance to process things, to regulate. But for a woman, that exact same hour of silence is supposedly experienced as a threat, something that causes discomfort, anxiety. So you have two people, same room, same silence, but two totally different internal realities. It's a really stark contrast. So why the different reactions? What's driving this? Well, according to the source, it all comes down to the internal monologue. You know, that voice inside your head. The male internal monologue is described as being geared towards problem solving. It's directional, it's productive. The female internal monologue, on the other hand, is said to lean more towards rumination. That's where thoughts can get kind of cyclical, looping over and over, and potentially creating anxiety. And this brings us to what's probably the most critical point of the whole theory. The argument is that if a woman can't tolerate her own internal silence, she will, without even thinking about it, systematically destroy the external silence in her environment. It's not malicious. It's presented as this subconscious drive to escape that inner discomfort. Okay, so how does this actually happen? How is this peace destroyed in the real world? The next part of the theory gets into the specific mechanisms, the actual behaviors that end up disrupting the quiet, often without anyone meaning to. The source gives this classic example, and you might have seen something like it play out. Picture this. The man gets home from a long day. He's tired, he just needs, say, 30 minutes of quiet to decompress. But his silence triggers her internal anxiety. She starts to think, what's wrong? Is he mad at me? So she probes, asking what's wrong, trying to connect. But what happens? A conflict gets created out of thin air. And just like that, the peace he desperately needed is gone. All because of a total miscommunication of needs. And it's not always that direct, what's wrong kind of thing. The theory points to other ways peace gets eroded. Things like manufacturing drama by overscheduling every single moment, or creating what the source calls emotional weather, that feeling of tension in the air that everyone has to constantly manage. Even something as simple as filling every quiet moment with noise, whether it's the TV, music, or just constant chatter, is seen as a way of keeping that essential stillness at bay. So what happens when this cycle just repeats over and over and over again? What's the long-term damage? Well, according to the source, the consequences are pretty severe. We're talking about the potential for complete relationship collapse. The theory says these effects build up over time. He starts to pull back, becoming emotionally distant. His attraction can start to fade. And this is a key point. He starts daydreaming about being alone, not because he doesn't love her, but just for the peace it would bring. Home stops feeling like a safe harbor, like a refuge, and eventually he leaves. And that could be physically walking out the door or just checking out emotionally while still being there. And that leads to one of the most powerful lines from the source material. It's this idea that a man cannot stay attracted long-term to a woman he can't truly rest with. It really frames peace not as a bonus, but as the absolute bedrock of long-term attraction. And this just perfectly illustrates the communication gap that's at the heart of this whole theory. Look at this. A man says, I need some quiet. What he means is, I need a minute to regulate myself so I can be present with you. But what she hears, according to the source, is, you're bothering me, I'm pulling away. And that fundamental misunderstanding, that's the spark that lights the fuse for the whole destructive cycle. So if this dynamic is as damaging as the source claims, is there any way to fix it? Is there a solution? Well, the last part of this theory shifts gears from just diagnosing the problem to offering a prescription. It lays out some pretty specific advice for both men and women on how to break this cycle. For women, the advice is really focused on internal work. It's about learning to sit with your own thoughts, even when they're uncomfortable. And it's about consciously reframing his silence, seeing it not as rejection, but as his way of regulating. The theory wraps this up by suggesting that being able to provide a peaceful environment is actually an incredibly valuable thing to bring to a relationship. And for men, the advice is all about validation and setting boundaries. First, recognize that your need for peace is totally legitimate. It's not something to feel guilty about. Then, the source suggests you should actually screen for this kind of compatibility before getting into a serious long-term relationship. And if you're in one, you need to set clear boundaries around your need for that quiet time. The ultimate takeaway here is that this peace is non-negotiable. It's something you just can't sacrifice. So, after all that, the entire theory we've just walked through really boils down to one single question. Is peace in a relationship just a nice to have, a bonus, or is it, as this theory argues, the absolute foundation that everything else, the love, the trust, the attraction, is built on? Is it foundational or is it optional?